In the 7th year of marriage, Madison Parker discovered that her husband had a 6-year-old son. Hiding behind the slide at the kindergarten, she watched as Mark Edwards bent down to pick up and play with a little boy. "Daddy, it's been so long since you last visited me." Her husband patted the boy's head. "Good boy, Annan. Daddy's been busy with work, so you must listen to Mommy, okay?" Boom. Madison stood frozen in place, her mind instantly going blank. Dad, Mom, 2 figures. One large and one small, with strikingly similar appearances. Everything was telling her that the man who had vowed to love her forever had long since been unfaithful. They grew up together and had been in love for years. Madison was once stabbed in the abdomen while saving him, losing not only their child but also the ability to bear children for life. At that time, Mark knelt beside her, his eyes red, and said, "I don't want any child, I only need you." His trembling voice still echoed in her ears, yet the scene before her now shattered that vow to pieces. Madison staggered backward, her heart feeling as if it had been carved into 1,000 bloody pieces by a sharp blade. She didn't dare to look again, afraid she might rush over to confront Mark, and even more afraid of being rejected like a pitiful clown, crying and despised. She turned and fled in panic at the kindergarten gate. Her best friend Lin Shuyu had been waiting for her for a long time. Seeing her pale face, she quickly got out of the car. "Madison, what's wrong with you? Xiaobao said you went back to get something you left behind. What exactly happened?" Xiaobao is the son of my best friend Lin Shuyu, who had been pestering Madison to accompany her to the parent-teacher conference today. Madison was pale, with tears welling up in her eyes. "Shuyu, help me look into someone." "Who, Mark?" Her throat tightened as she spoke hoarsely. "He has a son. Baby, I still have 1 more week before I can come back. Have you missed me?" Madison looked at Mark's message, tears streaming down her face like broken pearls. Every July, he would go on a 2-week business trip, claiming it was to inspect overseas branches. For 6 whole years, she had never doubted a thing. But reality slapped her hard in the face, cruelly mocking her foolishness. Mark wasn't on a business trip at all. He was off accompanying his mistress and their illegitimate child. If not for today's accident, she might have remained in the dark. Madison tortured herself by repeatedly looking at the photos in her hands. Outside the window, torrential rain poured down, occasionally illuminated by flashes of lightning that revealed her face, pale as paper. Perhaps she should have foreseen this outcome long ago. Edward's family has always been traditional. How could they tolerate a woman who cannot bear children taking the position of Edward's wife? Unless they had planned everything from the start. The one who deeply loved her, Mark, what role did he play? Madison's heart was wrenched with pain. She and Mark had grown up together since childhood, and everyone said that Madison and Mark were meant to be together forever. At the age of 8, when she fell from a tree while playing, it was he who risked himself to cushion her fall, breaking his arm yet smiling and saying it didn't hurt at all. At 12, when her first period stained her skirt, he, fully aware of what was happening, was so frightened that he tearfully declared he would die for her. At the age of 18, he secretly went to participate in an underground car race and, against all odds, won a ring to confess his love to her. He said, "Madison, I will love you for a lifetime." A young man's love is always pure and passionate, and it had long captured Madison's heart. Later, just before their wedding, she was kidnapped by his enemies and held captive for 3 days and nights. When she was found, she was already on the verge of death. Mark had 3 ribs broken to save her, and it was during that incident that she took a knife for Mark, losing her ability to become a mother. When Edward's mother learned of this, she did consider separating them. It was Mark who, despite his injuries, knelt in the Edwards family ancestral hall for 3 days, fasting in protest, declaring, "I would rather forsake the Edwards family than be without Madison." This forced Edward's mother to relent. After recovering from their injuries, they quickly married, and the entire capital bore witness to their moving love story. In the end, he still betrayed her. The phone rang, and the screen displayed the word husband. How ironic it seemed. Madison numbly pressed the answer button, and the man Parker's gentle voice came through. "Sweetheart, have you been eating well at home alone? Have you missed me?" If it were in the past, she would have been lost in the sweetness of love, unable to resist eagerly responding to him. But now, she was afraid that if she spoke, her sobs would be impossible to hide. "Baby, did something happen? Don't be scared, I'll come back to be with you right now." Mark's voice was frantic as he immediately got up to return. But Madison didn't want to see him at all right now. "I'm fine." She had tried her best to control herself, but her voice was still terribly hoarse. "I'm fine. Work is more important. Don't come back. I just have a bit of a cold." This was the first time she had lied to Mark. The man remained oblivious, seemingly distracted by something, but still carefully reminded her, "Then get some rest early. Remember to call me. Don't make me worry." Madison softly murmured millimeter in agreement. She was about to hang up the phone when she heard a woman's suggestive call from the other end. "Mark, Annan is already asleep. We can." She keenly noticed the man's breathing grow heavier for a moment before the call abruptly ended. Madison suddenly clenched her phone tightly, her knuckles turning white from the force. Unable to suppress the chill in her heart, he and that woman were together. She didn't dare to think any further. She began to whimper unnaturally, a sound beyond her control. As if a pair of massive hands were gripping her heart, causing unbearable, fatal pain. She had considered the possibility. Mark was forced into it for the sake of that child. But now it seemed clear that he was the active party. Lin Shuyu sensed something was wrong and immediately pushed the door open, only to see Madison looking utterly despondent. The usually bold and decisive woman found herself hesitating to approach. "Madison, he's not worth it for a man." Tears fell on the photo, making a ticking sound. Lin Shu's heart ached terribly. She pulled Madison into her arms and gritted her teeth as she scolded. "Madison, Mark is such a scumbag. When he proposed to you, he said every sweet word imaginable, and now he dares to secretly raise a woman and child behind your back." Madison closed her eyes, letting tears stream down freely, having long made up her mind in her heart. The next morning, the rain cleared and the sky brightened. Madison had not slept all night. She had pondered all night long. Having witnessed love in its purest form, how could she endure a heart that had long since changed? She deeply loved Mark, and she was Madison, the eldest daughter of the Parker family. She couldn't tolerate any wrongdoing in her eyes. Thinking this, she called the Parker family. "Dad, I remember the Parker family wanted to expand their business in the UK, coincidentally. Shua's husband is from the British royal family, and she's taking the kids back in half a month. I'd like to go along and see." Mr. Parker was puzzled. "Did Mark ask you to inquire about this?" "No, this time I'm going on my own." Madison smiled bitterly. Everyone assumed she and Mark were a united front. Even her own father was no exception. Parker was surprised. His daughter had always been unwilling to leave Edwards's side for even a moment. So why did she suddenly want to go somewhere so far away? "Madison, did Mark do something wrong to you?" Parker's tone immediately turned serious. Madison pursed her lips and finally chose to keep it to herself for now. "Dad, don't ask for now. I'll tell you everything after I go to England." Edwards and Parker families had been close friends for generations, and in recent years, their ties had grown even stronger due to marital connections. She didn't want the Parker family to suffer even the slightest harm because of her. In the end, Parker Sr. couldn't win against his daughter and reluctantly agreed. "All right, come to the Parker residence later to familiarize yourself with the relevant matters." Madison nodded. After hanging up the phone, she got up to wash up, only to see her eyes swollen like walnuts in the mirror, her heart filled with bitterness. The lawyer had already drafted the divorce agreement and sent it over. But she still hadn't figured out how to bring it up with Mark. After all, years of affection weren't so easy to let go of. She covered the traces of her crying with makeup, changed into a professional outfit, and then left the room. Downstairs, Lin Shuyu was having breakfast with her son. It seemed her state yesterday had given Xiaobao quite a scare. "Auntie's awake." Xiaobao ran over on his little legs. Madison grabbed her hand and blew on it gently. "Mommy said Auntie's heart hurt yesterday. I'll blow on it to make it better." The innocence of a 6-year-old was truly heartwarming. Madison gently touched his cheek. "Good boy, Xiaobao, Auntie doesn't hurt anymore. Go find Mommy now." Xiaobao nodded blankly before happily scampering into Lin Shua's arms. Madison recalled the laughter of Mark and that child from yesterday. She thought if their own child had survived, it would probably be older than that kid by now. Madison took a deep breath, suppressing the ache in her heart. Gave brief instructions, and left, but just as she stepped out of the villa's gate, she spotted a figure standing beside the Maybach in the distance. Mark looked exhausted, lightly holding a cigarette between his lips, surrounded by a haze of smoke that made his features indistinct. Madison was stunned. The records showed that both Jiang Shuoro and her son had birthdays in July. Jiang Shuoro's birthday had already passed, but her son's hadn't yet. Why would he suddenly return? As if sensing the intensity of the gaze, the man belatedly turned to investigate. But the moment he saw Madison, his previously dull eyes suddenly brightened. He strode over to Madison and pulled her into his arms. The man's embrace remained Parker warm, yet at this moment it burned so intensely that it made her tremble all over. "Has your cold gotten any better? I could tell something was off from your voice, so I rushed back overnight. When I got home and found you weren't there, I figured you must be at Lin Shua's place." Marcus' voice was filled with concern, and his expression showed no sign of pretense. Madison still couldn't understand why the man who once loved her to the bone could now peacefully build a family and have children with another woman. Her lips trembled slightly as she struggled to swallow the bitterness in her throat. She wanted to confront him, but in the end, she just murmured weakly, "I'm fine now, I was just about to head home." Mark let out a relieved sigh. "Next time you're sick, remember to tell me, or I'll worry myself to death." The man's voice Parker was soft and deep, momentarily giving her the illusion that all was peaceful and beautiful with the world. But out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a slender figure not far away. Jiang Shuoro stood under the tree, speaking into her phone, and the next moment, Mark's phone rang. He glanced down at his phone, his expression troubled. "There's an urgent matter at the company. I need to go handle it." Madison felt her breath catch. She wasn't blind. She had seen the name that flashed by, Jiang Shuoro. The bitterness in her heart was about to overflow. Madison forced back the sourness and spoke, "All right, you should go. Company matters are important." Mark looked at her with guilt in his eyes, planted another kiss on her forehead, and then hurriedly got into the car and left. Jiang Shuoro hung up the phone after Mark got into the car. She swayed her hips as she walked over. "Hello, Miss Parker. My name is Jiang Shuoro. She hesitated, then seeing Madison's tightly pressed lips, she understood. "It seems Miss Parker already knows about me and Enon. Well then, let's wait and enjoy the show." Madison hailed a taxi and followed behind Jiang Shuoro. In the hospital, she stood at the ward door watching everything unfold inside. Feeling only a sharp pain piercing through her heart, she bit her lip hard, not letting a single sound escape. At this moment, Mark's son was receiving an IV drip, his small face pale and exhausted, looking utterly pitiful. Mark was frantic with worry, pacing back and forth in the hospital room, unleashing a torrent of anger. "What good are you all? You can't even treat a child's fever properly." Among the busy doctors nearby, Madison recognized Mark's close friend Ju Chi. "Your son caught a cold and fever because he wasn't properly cared for. Don't take it out on my colleagues." "Mark, I really don't understand what you're thinking. Didn't you promise to pay that woman off and send her away after she gave birth? Now you dare call me over for just a minor cold. What if Madison finds out?" After a long silence, Mark's voice sounded, tinged with exhaustion and helplessness. "What choice do I have? A mother and child share an unbreakable bond. Every time I try to send Shuoro away, Enon cries uncontrollably. I can't just let the child keep crying. Can I? Is it really the child who can't bear to part, or is it you who can't let go? You know the answer in your heart." Ju Chi snorted coldly. Hearing this, Mark grew even more agitated. He rubbed his throbbing temples forcefully. "Don't talk nonsense. The only person I've ever loved is Madison. But the Edwards family must have an heir. You have to help me keep this from Madison. I don't want to hurt her. As for Shuoro, after all, she bore me a child, and I can't treat her unfairly." Hearing this, Jiang Shuoro finally pushed the door open and entered, weeping like a rain-drenched pear blossom. "Mark, it's all my fault for not taking good care of Enon. After you left last night, Enon developed a fever and kept crying to see you. I didn't say anything because I was afraid of disturbing you and Madam. Mark touched the child's burning cheek, sighed, and his heart softened. He pulled the woman into his arms to comfort her. Don't cry, Shuero, I don't blame you. Anan is our child, and it's me who's been an irresponsible father. Jiang Shuero tugged at Mark's collar, her fingers brushing across his chest. Mark, I know I'm not worthy to compare with Miss Parker, but I just can't bear to see our child suffer. Mark's expression turned stern. Who dares to make my Mark's son suffer? You should take care of yourself instead. Look how your face is streaked with tears. He raised his hand and gently wiped away a tear from the corner of her eye, the intimate gesture piercing Madison's heart with pain. Madison clenched her fists tightly, letting her nails dig crescent-shaped marks into her palms until they bled. Yet she felt no pain at all, or no matter how much it hurts. Nothing compares to the pain in the heart. The downpour started again. Madison left the hospital just like that. She walked numbly through the rain, drenched and unfeeling. Raindrops streamed down her cheeks, blurring her vision. Yet no amount of water could wash away the wretchedness in her heart. By the time she arrived at Parker Group, her ankles were already blistered from the high heels, a vivid red. Her appearance startled the receptionist, who hurried over to support her. Parker, what happened to you? Should I call President Edwards? If President Edwards sees you like this, he'll be heartbroken again. Madison felt a numbness in her chest. Yes, everyone assumed without exception that Mark loved her, but they didn't know how much deception and betrayal were mixed into that love. She gently pushed away the supporting hand and said hoarsely, I'm fine. It suddenly started raining on the way. Help me buy a set of clean clothes and bring them over. She handed over the black card in her hand, then locked herself in the nearest meeting room. As the door closed, Madison could no longer hold back her sobs. She had thought that after seeing those photos, she had already become immune to reality, but truly seeing the family of three appear before her, the deepest scar in her heart was torn open repeatedly, leaving it raw and bleeding. Her heart-wrenching cries echoed through the vast conference room. She desperately wanted to ask Mark, why was it him who made those solemn vows of love? Yet now it's also him who's happily starting a family with someone else. It wasn't until the sound of knocking came that she managed to break free from her anguish. The person at the door had already left, leaving only a neatly placed set of new clothes and that black card, with a cup of warm water beside them. A handwritten note was placed under the water glass. Miss Parker, rest assured, I haven't contacted Mr. Edwards. I know you're worried he might be concerned. Madison felt a mix of emotions but ultimately tore the note into pieces and threw it in the trash. She took the clothes and changed in the washroom. Moments later, Madison transformed back into the lofty Miss Parker, the heiress who feared nothing. She walked to the CEO's office in her high heels and was busy there the entire day. During this time, Mark sent her many messages, but she didn't read or reply to any of them. It wasn't until evening that she dragged her exhausted body back to the villa, planning to pack her bags and leave the next morning. To her surprise, as soon as she opened the door, the sound of a child's playful laughter came from the living room, and there, right before her eyes, was Jiang Shuero. The woman was wearing Edward's family's old servant uniform, and not far away, a little boy had made a complete mess of the living room. Seeing Madison enter, Jiang Shuero rose from beside Mark, smiling gracefully, and Parker softly, Madam, you're back. I'm the maid sent from the old house to take care of the young master. Madison subconsciously bit her lip tightly, even finding it hard to breathe. Mark, how dare he? How dare he bring these two people into their home? Noticing Madison's change in expression, Mark hurriedly explained, Darling, I sent you a message this afternoon. You might not have seen it. Edward's Yuan is a child Mom brought back from the orphanage, saying he has a connection with us. All the heartache had already been vented in that empty conference room. Now, Madison only felt a surge of anger boiling in her chest. These people were practically treating her like a fool. Mark, are you deliberately trying to stab at my heart? Her voice trembled slightly, clearly pushed to the brink of fury. Hearing this, Mark frowned slightly, not expecting Madison to react so strongly. He flusteredly explained, Baby, don't be angry. You know the Edwards family can't be without an heir, and I saw you grieving over that deceased child, so I agreed to Mom's request. if you don't like it, I'll have him sent away immediately. Everyone knows that Mark deeply loves Madison, and his principle is always Madison comes first, just like now. As long as Madison dislikes something, even her own son would be sent away immediately, yet such favoritism made Madison feel inexplicably disgusted. She was about to speak up and clarify the matter, but the child named Edward Yuan burst into loud sobs. "You bad woman. Daddy, why are you with this bad woman? Don't you want an anymore?" The child's piercing cries gave Mark a splitting headache, prompting him to snap sharply, "Edward's Yuan, who taught you such nonsense? Are you all dead? Hurry up and take the young master back to his room." The servants rushed forward. Flustered as they carried the still wailing Edward's Yuan back to his room, Jiang Shuoro also seemed panicked, repeatedly admitting fault. "Edward's president, it's all my fault. Please don't blame the young master." As she spoke, she cast a tender glance at Mark, the grievance in her eyes enough to make any man's heart ache. Mark sighed, his tone softening slightly. "I'm not blaming him. What does a child know? You should go take care of him now." Madison took in everything. Her heart growing colder, she broke free from the late-night Mark, went straight upstairs, and shut the following Mark out the door. Mark stood at the door, his heart filled with frustration, yet he patiently soothed, "Baby, it's all my fault. I'll send that child away first thing tomorrow morning. If you don't want me to stay with you, that's fine. Just get some rest first, and we can talk about everything tomorrow." Madison leaned against the door, sitting on the floor, listening to the sound of the man's departing footsteps. Her heart had long been numb, devoid of any feeling from the pain. What difference does it make whether the child is sent away or not? Blood ties can never be severed. In the end, the one who should leave is her. Madison didn't respond, instead locking the door behind her. Alone, she leaned against the cold door, listening as the man's footsteps faded away. Until she could no longer hold herself up and slid to the floor, she felt utterly exhausted, both physically and mentally. She had no idea how much time had passed when her phone chimed. Numbly swiping the screen, she saw a friend request from a stranger. "It's Jiang Shuoro, Mrs. Edwards. Since you drove Mr. Edwards out of your room, don't blame him for coming to me." Madison's pupils constricted abruptly as she stood up and walked out of the bedroom. Immediately spotting a faint light coming from the study at the end of the second-floor hallway, the door was slightly ajar, and through the crack came a woman's seductive voice. "Mark, you're hurting me." The man grunted with a cold, menacing tone, "Afraid of pain yet still lured me here. You really can't stay well-behaved even with a child." In an instant, Madison felt as if she had fallen into an icy abyss, her entire body turning cold with dread. She never expected that Mark would be so impatient. The commotion inside continued as Jiang Shuoro suppressed her moans. "Mark, I only wanted to make you happy on behalf of the mistress, seeing how upset she made you. Don't make excuses for your own wantonness. Remember, if you want Anan to stay with the Edwards family, don't cause trouble for the mistress." Madison couldn't bear to listen any longer, and she didn't even know how she managed to leave. Upon returning to the room, she immediately rushed into the bathroom, leaned over the sink, and vomited in disgust. Only when a sharp pain twisted in her stomach did she slowly rise. Lifting her head to see her disheveled reflection in the mirror, Madison had long run out of tears. She was, after all, the young lady of the Parker family, and someone as proud as her should never have ended up like this. She had no idea how long she had stayed in the bathroom. Only when the sky began to lighten did she slowly get up and return to bed. This time, it was she who didn't want him anymore. Early the next morning, Madison saw Jiang Shuorong standing by the dining table arranging bowls and chopsticks as she came downstairs. After a night of effort, she had successfully changed out of the maid's uniform and into a fitted cheongsam, showcasing her curvaceous figure. With her face bearing some resemblance to Madison, it was no wonder Mark had chosen her. Seeing Madison's figure appear, Jiang Shuoro warmly greeted, "Madam, you're awake. Come have breakfast." She seemingly unintentionally turned slightly, revealing the mottled kiss marks on her neck, her slender wrist adorned with a translucent emerald bracelet. Madison recognized it at a glance. It was the very one Edward's mother used to wear, the Edwards family heirloom. She had heard Edward's mother mention it before. Mark had once asked for it on her behalf, but Edward's mother refused, citing her inability to bear children. Now, it was actually worn on Jiang Shuoro's hand. Madison clenched her fists, suddenly feeling that everything she had held onto was utterly ridiculous. She had even considered the long-standing friendship between the two families and didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But in the end, Jiang Shuoro was Edward's mother's acknowledged daughter-in-law. Even yesterday at the hospital, Mark's close friends knew about Jiang Shuoro's existence. Only she, like a fool, was led around by Mark's empty promises. Madison couldn't help but smile bitterly. If Mark had decided to have a child back then, she would have been able to let go and would never have entangled with him again. Just thinking about the scene in the study last night, her heart still ached with a dense, stinging pain, and she couldn't help but want to slap Mark across the face. But this wasn't the outcome she wanted. She wanted him to regret it for the rest of his life. At this moment, Mark came downstairs looking completely refreshed, showing no signs of having been exhausted all night. As he passed by Jiang Shuoro, their ambiguous exchange of glances was unmistakable, causing her to lower her head in shyness. The man turned around and only then noticed Madison looking pale, making him tense up. "Baby, did you get sick from the rain yesterday? Maybe I should skip work today and stay home to take care of you." Right now, Madison couldn't wait to leave. Every second spent with Mark felt suffocating to her. She was beginning to find it repulsive. "No need," she refused outright. "Company matters are more important. I'll just rest at home." Mark frowned, feeling inexplicably unsettled. Normally, Madison would cling to him, unwilling to let him leave her side for even a moment. But now, everything about her was. But he knew Madison well enough to understand her mind was made up. He could only instruct the servants again. "Take good care of Madam at home." The surrounding servants exchanged glances, seemingly long immune to their affectionate displays, and nodded one after another. At that moment, Jiang Shuoro suddenly stood up, walked over to Mark and began straightening his clothes for him. "Your collar isn't properly adjusted. Let me help you." And Mark subconsciously lowered his head, letting her adjust it. It was this unconscious gesture that was the most heartbreaking. The surrounding servants all gasped, their eyes turning toward Madison, not daring to make a sound. Only then did Mark realize something was amiss. He took a sudden step back, maintaining distance from Jiang Shuoro, and politely thanked her. "I'm heading to the company," he said as he walked to Madison's side, lowering his head to place a kiss on her forehead before whispering, "Be good and wait for me to return." The doting tone was identical to the one he had used in the study the night before, at the dining table. Madison stared at the steaming breakfast before her, finding it as tasteless as chewing wax. Marcus Parker's gentle care and Jiang Shuoro's provocative displays. Each scene replayed in her mind, making it impossible for her to eat. Madison turned and went upstairs directly to start packing her belongings. This villa held too many of their memories. She had to personally discard every single trace of them. Jiang Shuoro appeared behind her at some point. "Miss Parker, you're really composed, aren't you? Anan is the future heir of the Edwards family, and I'm the birth mother of the heir. There's no place for you in this household." Madison looked up at her with a faint smile. "So what?" Jiang Shuoro was somewhat taken aback by her calm reaction. Frowning, she continued, "I know you don't want a divorce, but you can't be so selfish." Clinging to the title of Edward's wife and refusing to let go, the Edwards family would never accept a woman who can't bear children. Madison let out a cold laugh, her eyes filled with mockery. "Edward's wife, if you want it, you can have it." With that, she directly took out the divorce agreement from her bag and handed it to Jiang Shuoro. "You know Mark's feelings for me. Getting him to agree to a divorce won't be easy. Now that the divorce agreement is in your hands, if you have the ability, get him to sign it and send it back to me. If you don't, then be prepared to remain nameless and unrecognized for the rest of your life." Jiang Shuoro's face lit up with joy as she snatched the document. Looking at the Madison's already signed name above, her expression carried a hint of inquiry. "Are you really willing to leave Mark?" Madison felt a tremor in her heart. When loving someone has permeated most of her life, hearing words like leave couldn't possibly leave her truly unruffled. She slowly closed her eyes, suppressing the surging bitterness in her heart. When she opened them again, Only calm remained in her gaze. Madison, wouldn't stoop to fighting others for a man. She would risk her life for Mark. But she could not tolerate betrayal, Jiang Shuoro scoffed, thinking she was just being stubborn, but still took the divorce papers with her. Madison looked at the walk-in closet filled with Mark's gifts to her, yet her heart remained empty. She began packing her belongings. Clothes, documents, and important items, leaving nothing behind as she placed everything into her suitcase. As for Mark's gifts to her, she didn't keep a single one, packing them all up to be sent to the auction house. Since she had decided to leave, she wanted to make a clean break. The servants watched from a distance, whispering among themselves about what had happened, but she couldn't be bothered to explain. By the time everything was packed, it was already afternoon. She sat in the living room with her suitcase, waiting for Lin Shuyu to pick her up. It was at this moment Madison vaguely remembered that she hadn't seen Edward Yuan all day. Could he really have been sent away? Just as she was filled with doubt, she saw Mark rushing back in a hurry, followed by Jiang Shuoro and Edward's mother. "Madam, please tell me where Anan is," Jiang Shuoro cried as she rushed up to her, grabbing her arms and shaking them incessantly. The sudden impact made Madison stagger backward, accidentally bumping into the corner of the table behind her. An excruciating pain instantly surged through her. She gasped in pain. "What's gotten into you? How would I know where he is?" Unexpectedly, Jiang Shuoro cried even harder, and casually picked up a fruit knife from the dining table, pressing it against Madison's neck. "Madam, I know you don't like Anan, but you can't secretly send Anan away without telling Edwards. Give Anan back to me. Edward's Yuan has actually gone missing." Madison froze in place, not daring to move. The fruit knife had already left a shallow cut on her neck, sending waves of stinging pain. "Snap out of it. I don't know where your son is." Yet Jiang Shuoro seemed utterly deranged, her knife-wielding hand trembling slightly. "Impossible. You're the only one who dislikes Anan. Today you even called all those cars to help you move things. If it wasn't you, then who?" Her eyes were red and swollen, truly resembling a mother who had lost her child. Her voice was hoarse from crying, yet she still pleaded, "Madam, I beg you to return Anan to me. He is my only solace." As she spoke, she threw away the fruit knife in her hand and fell to her knees with a thud in front of Madison. "Madam, Anan is my life." Madison finally managed to break free from the restraints. Finding these words utterly ironic, she couldn't help but demand, "Give him back to you. What does an adopted child from an orphanage have to do with you? Why should he be given back to you? He's my..." Jiang Shuoro seemed to blurt out half of it in haste, then realizing her mistake, quickly stopped and began to sob quietly. But this time, it was Madison who wouldn't let it go. She took in everything with a flicker of expression, deliberately provoking Jiang Shuoro. "What is he to you? Go on, say it." "Enough," Mark snapped sharply. "Madison, stop being so aggressive." Madison flashed a look of disbelief in her eyes as she stared blankly at Mark, her pupils trembling slightly. Having grown up with Mark since childhood as close companions, he had never been willing to say a single harsh word to her. Even when she was held hostage by Jiang Shuoro earlier, he hadn't spoken up for her. Yet the first time he raised his voice at her was to protect his lover and their illegitimate child. Disappointment. Countless thoughts converged into this single word in her mind. She was now utterly disappointed with Mark. Mark could see the change in her expression and realized he had gone too far. Quickly softening his tone, he said, "Madison, I'm not blaming you. Anan has been under her care ever since she was adopted. She just got emotional for a moment and..." Madison coldly cut him off. "Enough, I don't want to hear it. Mark, I'll say it one more time. I don't know where your son is. If he's really missing, you can call the police." Her eyes held not a trace of affection, her calmness unsettling Mark, to the point where she didn't even notice Madison directly assuming Edwards that Yuan was his son. At that moment, the assistant hurried in from outside. "Edwards, we've found the child. He was on a truck heading out of the city. Fortunately, it hadn't gone far, and the young master is already on his way back." Everyone present breathed a sigh of relief, except for Madison, who couldn't relax. Today, she had called several vehicles to deliver items to the auction house, which undoubtedly shifted suspicion back onto her. Edwards's mother sat on the sofa, snorted coldly, and said, "If you can't have a child yourself, forget it. I sent you one, and you're still not satisfied. I think you just want the Edwards family to die out." Edwards's mother's words were extremely harsh, almost like tearing open Madison's wound and then rubbing salt in it. She subconsciously looked at Mark, only to find Mark staring intently at Jiang Shuoro, lost in thought. Suddenly, Madison felt as if her chest was being crushed, making it hard to breathe. She smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "Right, I shouldn't have risked my life to save Mark back then. I should have let him die." The words were spoken, but my heart shattered into pieces. Mark suddenly looked up, only to see Madison with sorrowful eyes. The bright red mark on her neck became increasingly glaring, and his heart suddenly tightened. "Madison, don't say things in anger." He hurried forward, trying to grab Madison's hand, but Madison coldly avoided him. No sorrow is greater than the death of the heart. The mere thought of those hands having caressed Jiang Shuoro's body the night before filled her with overwhelming disgust. Madison ignored him, focusing on her phone as she messaged Lin Shuyu to ask how much longer she would be. For some reason, there was no reply. The villa fell into silence, broken only by Jiang Shuoro's intermittent sobs. Before long, Edward's Yuan was brought back. As soon as they met, he hid behind Mark and pointed at Madison, saying, "Daddy, she's the one who wanted to abandon me. It's her." Hearing this, Mrs. Edwards immediately stood up, her expression stern. "Madison, what do you have to say for yourself? Anan is just a child. Would he lie?" Meanwhile, Mark's eyes flickered slightly. As their gazes met, Madison understood the emotion in his eyes. He doubted her. Madison suddenly felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She forced a bitter smile and said in a low voice, "Forget it. Think whatever you want. It's useless no matter what I say." "Madison, what kind of attitude is this?" Edward's mother said furiously. "I can see you're guilty, after all. You're still the daughter-in-law of the Edwards family. Committing such a grave mistake warrants punishment. Starting tonight, you'll kneel in the Edwards family ancestral hall as punishment. Do you admit your fault or not?" Madison initially wanted to refuse outright. After all, she had done nothing wrong. So why should she admit guilt? But then Mark suddenly spoke up. "Let it be, Madison. This child must stay no matter what. It might do you good to reflect in the ancestral hall. This matter ends here. No one is to bring it up again. Xueru and I will take Anan to the hospital for a checkup first, and the driver will take the elderly madam back to the old residence." Mark had the final say, leaving no room for further discussion. With those words, he proactively helped Jiang Shuoro up, and the family of three walked straight out the door without giving Madison a single glance from start to finish. Outside the window, the car started up, and Madison watched silently. Suddenly feeling utterly ridiculous, she suddenly remembered 7 years ago, when Mark had knelt in the Edwards family ancestral hall for 3 days and nights to marry her, his freshly set broken ribs nearly leaving him permanently disabled. In truth, it wasn't just Edward's mother pressuring Mark. Lin Shuyu and Parker's father, Parker's mother, had also been persuading Madison. The Edwards family's generational emphasis on heirs was something everyone could see. Back then, her heart ached for Mark. Believing their love could withstand all trials, despite immense pressure, she went ahead and registered the marriage with Mark. Now, could this be the retribution for loving the wrong person? Mrs. Edwards assumed the demeanor of a mother-in-law, waving her hand to order the servants to forcibly remove Madison. The servants who had been there for years couldn't bear to see it, whispering comfort into Madison's ear. "Don't worry, we all believe you're not that kind of person. Perhaps Mr. Edwards has some unspeakable difficulties. He loves you so much, he wouldn't truly let you suffer." Madison gave a bitter smile. Whatever, she was leaving anyway. None of this mattered anymore. She had knelt in the Edwards family ancestral hall for 3 days and nights. It wasn't until the morning of the 4th day that the hall's heavy doors slowly creaked open, and Mark stepped inside. "Baby, I'm here to take you home." Mark's voice was hoarse, his expression weary. Madison acted as if she hadn't heard him, her vacant gaze fixed on the rows of ancestral tablets before her. Yes, Edward's family ancestral hall is so well preserved, with every generation of leaders enshrined here, the incense never ceasing. It was her delusion to believe Mark would abandon the child. Ending up in this situation is entirely her own doing. Madison ignored Mark, slowly rising to her feet, having knelt for too long. Her legs were numb, and as soon as she stood, her entire body collapsed heavily downward. Mark quickly caught her in his arms, preventing her from falling again. "Madison, I know you're upset, but I had to do that day. Otherwise Mom wouldn't have let it go." Madison smiled bitterly and pushed Mark away with all her strength. "Mark, just how had to was it? What did you tell me back then? You said if I didn't like it, you could send that child away." Mark sighed lightly, his voice full of helplessness. "Madison, the Edwards family can't be without an heir. He's the best choice. We're husband and wife. You need to consider my position too." This line Madison had heard so often it made her ears ache. She couldn't help but sneer. "Really? I'd have thought he was your own son." Mark caught his breath, his gaze evasive. "How could that be? Darling, you're the only one I'll ever love in this lifetime. But Anan is a good kid, he's very well behaved. Tomorrow is Anan's birthday. The Edwards family will host a birthday banquet at the old mansion. It's the perfect opportunity to announce Anan's identity. As his mother, you should prepare properly." Madison laughed coldly in her heart. To be Edwards Ewan's mother, just the thought of it made her sick. She limped away from the Edwards family ancestral hall and spotted Lin Shuyu from a distance, who was anxiously waiting for her. Without hesitation, she strode toward Lin Shuyu, only to hear Mark's voice behind her. "Madison, I'll be preparing for tomorrow's birthday banquet at the old residence today. Go back and rest well. I'll send someone to pick you up in the morning." Madison didn't turn around, merely responding with a soft millimeter. For some reason, watching that gradually receding figure, Mark couldn't suppress the turmoil in his heart, but he warned himself not to soften again. He knew Madison's pride too well. Edwards Ewan would have to face this inevitable conflict if he wanted to reclaim his roots. He believed Madison loved him and would eventually compromise for him after the initial resistance. Meanwhile, Madison finally got into the car with Lin Shu as support. "Madison, I've already taken the suitcase you packed, and this document folder was given to me by Jiang Shuoro." Madison opened the document folder and saw the divorce agreement inside, with Mark's signature at the end. Through the car window, she gazed coldly at the old-fashioned Edwards family mansion. "Yeah, to the airport. We're leaving immediately, Mark. This time in the choice between two, I choose to give up on you." Early in the morning, Edwards family's old mansion was bustling with servants, decorated with lanterns and streamers everywhere, all preparing for the birthday banquet of the young master of the Edwards family. After returning from the ancestral hall yesterday, Mark locked himself in the study and hasn't come out since. He opened the drawer, inside which lay a will. It was left by Edwards Sr. before his death, clearly stipulating the conditions for the heir of the Edwards family and the requirements for inheriting shares. Mark looked at the will, feeling a weight lift from his heart. He was finally about to truly take control of the Edwards family. The Edwards family had a generations-old tradition. Only by having an heir could one inherit shares from the previous generation and become the true head of the Edwards family. Edwards Sr. passed away early. Naturally including this requirement in his will, Mark had to compromise with the family elders Edwards in order to inherit the family business. Just thinking about Madison, he felt a faint unease in his heart. He knew this decision would undoubtedly hurt her the most, but he had no other choice. "How are things at home? Madison, when are you coming over?" The assistant stood by respectfully and replied, "Mr. Edwards, rest assured, the stylist and driver have already been arranged to pick up Madam." Mark gave a non-committal hum, rubbing his throbbing forehead, feeling inexplicably irritable. He hadn't slept a wink last night, plagued by an inexplicable sense of foreboding that left him deeply unsettled. Whenever he thought of Madison's resolute retreating figure, Mark couldn't shake off a growing unease. But when he thought about Edward's family's future, he had no choice but to harden his heart. He could only silently remind himself that after today, everything would return to normal. He stood by the window, watching Edward's mother sitting in the yard, holding Edward's Ewan with adoration all over her face. "Anan, today is your birthday. Grandma prepared your favorite gift. Come see if you like it." Edward's Ewan just sweetly called out Grandma, and it was enough to make Edward's mother grin from ear to ear. "Shuaro, you've truly given me a wonderful grandson. Rest assured, as long as I live, no one will dare to treat you unfairly." Upon hearing this, Jiang Shuaro's face revealed a Parker-soft smile. "Thank you for your kindness, madam. It's my blessing to continue the Edwards family lineage. As long as madam is happy, and as long as Anan can grow up safely, I am content." Edwards's mother patted Jiang Shuaro's hand contentedly upon hearing this. "I know you're an obedient child, unlike Parker's daughter, who looks down on everyone." Jiang Shuaro didn't respond, merely standing by with downcast eyes, appearing docile and obedient. At that moment, a servant came forward to announce, "Madam, all the guests have arrived." Edwards's mother nodded and rose, holding Edward's Yuan's hand. As if suddenly remembering something, she turned back and instructed, "Shuaro, you should go back and rest first. The Parker family will be attending today's event, and it's not suitable for you to be present." A flash of resentment flickered in Jiang Shuaro's eyes, but she obediently nodded and turned to leave. The garden was already crowded with people. Early this morning, the official account of the Edwards Group posted a message announcing a celebration for the president. Mark's joy of welcoming a beloved son, yet it's common knowledge that years ago, Madison was injured while saving Mark and became unable to bear children. Many people came eagerly, wanting to know the origins of this child. "Mrs. Edwards is truly blessed. Back then, we all thought." The visitor trailed off, their tone filled with curiosity. The Edwards family, as a century-old aristocratic household, has always drawn attention regarding its heir. Over the years, Mark and Madison have shared a deep bond, with never a hint of scandal. Everyone thought the Edwards family had no heir, but who would have guessed Mark quietly produced a child out of nowhere? If there's no trickery involved here, who would believe it? Mrs. Edwards gave him a cold glance, but it was so fleeting it might as well have been imagined. When she spoke again, Mrs. Edwards' gaze softened. "Yes, Anan is an adopted child from the orphanage, but it seems fate has tied her to our Edwards family." Such an excuse is hardly convincing to anyone. Someone in the crowd muttered, "I think this Edwards' young master looks so much like Edwards Sr. Could he be Edwards Sr.'s illegitimate child?" Instantly, the way people looked at Edward's mother changed, and whispers spread through the garden. "Yes, the child's features do resemble Edward Sr. It's entirely possible they're related by blood." Back then, Miss Parker ruined her health saving President Edwards, leaving her unable to bear children. It can't be that President Edwards is bringing in his illegitimate child from outside to inherit the family business. Can it? Alas, aren't such things common in wealthy families? I used to think true love could exist even among the rich, but now it seems President Edwards' wife is the pitiable one. She once risked her life for President Edwards, only to end up like this. The crowd chattered incessantly, their speculations spiraling out of control once they began. Edward's mother darkened her expression and was about to speak. At that moment, Mark emerged from the house, dressed in a tailored suit that accentuated his tall, imposing figure and his cold, stern expression. "What's everyone talking about?" His deep voice carried an air of authority that commanded respect without needing to raise it. The crowd fell silent. After all, everyone knew Mark doted on his wife to the point of obsession. He had nearly risked his life to marry Madison in the first place. With the truth still unclear, whispering a few words in private was one thing. But no one was foolish enough to say such things in front of Mark. "Nothing much. We were just saying how fate seems to have brought the young master and Edwards together. I imagine Edwards must be quite pleased with this son of hers." The speaker implied something more, glancing around before continuing. "By the way, since it's the young master's birthday today, why isn't Edwards here?" The crowd also began to notice that on such an important occasion, Madison was conspicuously absent. They all instinctively turned their gaze toward Mark, waiting to see his reaction. Faced with everyone's inquiries, Mark's expression remained unchanged. He walked to Edward's mother's side, took Edward's Yuan's hand, and said, "No need for everyone to worry. Madison is just preparing a gift for Anan and is already on her way here. The birthday banquet is about to begin. And I still have some matters to attend to. Please make yourselves at home." With that, he unceremoniously led Edward's Ewan into the old mansion. Only when they reached outside the study on the second floor did Edward's Ewan speak up in confusion. "Daddy, today is my birthday, why can't Mommy be with me? I want Mommy." Mark looked stern and said in a serious tone, "Remember, from now on your mother's name is Madison." Edward's Ewan abruptly withdrew his hand upon hearing this. His eyes filled with resistance. "No, I don't want her to be my mom. She's a bad woman. Mom said she wants to send me away, she wants to take Dad from me. I don't want her." "Nonsense," Mark rebuked coldly. At times, he had to admit that Edward's Ewan was very much like him as a child, stubborn, unyielding in his convictions, and willing to go to any lengths to get what he wanted. Asking a child to call another unfamiliar woman mom, Mark knew in his heart that this was wrong, but they had no other choice. Jiang Shuoro heard the noise and came out of the room, seeing the scene before her. She gritted her teeth in secret. She knew Madison had already left with the divorce papers, just a little more waiting, and as the biological mother of the heir, she would surely secure the position of Edward's wife. Thinking of this, Jiang Shuoro pinched herself hard, wiped her tears, and walked over, pulling Edward's Ewan into her arms. "Mark, Anan is just a child. I gave birth to him and raised him all these years. It's only natural that he can't live without me. I know I mean nothing in your eyes, and your heart belongs only to Miss Parker, but I beg you not to make things difficult for Anan, for the sake of him being your own son. Please don't trouble him." Back then, she used this very trick to make Mark willingly sleep with her, and also made Mark reluctant to send her away. Sure enough, Mark looked moved as he helped her up and pulled her into his embrace. "Shuoro, I know you're sensible." He reached out to wipe the tears from the corner of her eye. His voice Parker soft. "As long as you don't covet the position of Mrs. Edwards, I'm willing to let you stay by my side and watch Anan grow up." Jiang Shuoro leaned into his embrace, a triumphant smile finally curling at the corners of her lips. It wasn't until a servant came to urge them that Mark reluctantly escorted Jiang Shuoro back to her room, then took Edward's Ewan downstairs by the hand. In the garden below, guests gathered in small groups, the atmosphere lively and bustling. Mark looked around but still couldn't see Madison. Not only Madison, but even the Parker family hadn't shown up yet. A sense of unease settled in his chest, accompanied by a vague premonition of something amiss. His assistant still hadn't sent any updates. He took out his phone to check, only to realize it had somehow turned off. Mark frowned and was about to put his phone away when he saw his assistant stride in with a grave expression. He immediately sensed something might be wrong and handed Edward's Ewan to Edwards's mother before turning back to the study. Only after the door closed did the assistant speak gravely. "Edwards, the driver and stylist sent to pick up Madam reported that she has disappeared." "Disappeared? How could she disappear?" Mark stared blankly, as if not comprehending the assistant's words. "Madison has disappeared. How is that possible? Yesterday he proposed to hold Edward's Ewan's birthday banquet, and she agreed readily without showing any signs of abnormality. How could she suddenly disappear?" "Edwards, the servants at the villa said that Madam never returned home yesterday, and her clothes and documents are all gone. Madam must have left on her own initiative." Hearing this, Marcus' eyes darkened. His assistant's words were like a stone, smashing hard into his heart and instantly stirring up a storm. His mind buzzed, as if he had even lost the ability to think. Impossible. Madison would never leave on her own. Is she in some kind of danger? Mark didn't even realize his voice was trembling. Madison was his wife. She loved him so much. How could she possibly leave voluntarily? The assistant remained silent and handed over his phone. "Edwards, you'll understand once you see this." Mark took the phone and saw Parker Group's official statement. As soon as he opened it, he narrowed his eyes, somewhat puzzled, and scrolled down. When he saw the divorce announcement, it felt like a bolt from the blue. Mark blinked in disbelief and read it again carefully. He recognized every word, but the combination left him utterly confused. How could he have gotten divorced overnight? The assistant knew what he was about to say was cruel, but he had no choice but to speak. "President Edwards, the Parker Group's official account has already issued a statement, severing all ties with the Edwards family from now on. Parker family's eldest daughter, Madison, and Edwards Group's CEO Mark have already terminated their marital relationship. As soon as the assistant finished speaking, Mark's heart sank heavily. What on earth happened? Madison is my wife. How could the Parker family post such a thing privately without my permission? He forced himself to calm down, but his tightly clenched, whitened palms had already betrayed his unease. He coldly ordered, "Prepare the car, I'm going to Parker's house." The assistant immediately went to make preparations without a word, only to have Jiang Shuoro suddenly burst in. "Mark, Annan's birthday party is about to start. You can't leave now," Mark said with a dark expression and sharp eyes. "Jiang Shuoro, when did you learn to eavesdrop on my conversations at the door?" Jiang Shuoro trembled with fear under that gaze. She tried the same trick again, her eyes instantly welling up with tears as she weakly knelt before Mark, clutching his sleeve. "Mark, I was just worried about you. Today is very important for Annan. If you leave, how will the outside world view Annan?" "Mark, I can give up anything. I beg you, for Annan's sake. Since he's your own son, please wait until the birthday banquet is over before going." "Okay." Mark lowered his gaze and saw her delicate, innocent face. Under normal circumstances, he would have felt heartache, but now his mind was completely occupied by Madison, leaving no room for Jiang Shuoro. "Get away from me." He forcefully pushed Jiang Shuoro aside, his expression terrifyingly dark. Jiang Shuoro was flung aside, hitting the corner of the table and crying out in pain, clutching her aching waist. She knelt on the ground, looking at Mark with disbelief, her eyes filled with hurt. "Mark, you, Jiang Shuoro, you'd better pray that Madison's disappearance has nothing to do with you. Otherwise," Mark didn't finish his words, just gave her a cold glance before turning and striding away. Jiang Shuoro watched Mark's retreating figure. The resentment in her eyes was startling. Suddenly, she felt a dull pain in her lower abdomen, and faint traces of blood began to seep beneath her. "Someone, quickly call the old madam, my child, save my child." She gritted her teeth against the pain, shouting with all her might, her gaze growing increasingly frenzied. She had sacrificed too much for this day. She absolutely couldn't let Madison destroy everything she had built. Mark quickened his pace toward the exit. As he passed through the garden, he noticed the guests whispering among themselves, their eyes flickering toward him from time to time. He frowned. An indescribable sense of losing control suddenly surging through him. He could no longer maintain his composure, wishing he could fly straight to Parker's house immediately. The assistant, noticing Mark's gloomy expression, didn't dare to even breathe loudly, quickly starting the car and speeding away. Throughout the journey, Mark kept trying to contact Madison, but her phone was turned off. To his shock, a red exclamation mark appeared in the WeChat chat box. He couldn't believe it, he had been blocked by Madison. What on earth happened? Mark's heart felt as if it were hanging by a thread. Tossed up and down with the speeding car, leaving him restless and uneasy, Madison's phone was unreachable, so he had no choice but to call Parker's father. To his surprise, Parker's father's phone was also turned off. Mark clenched his teeth hard, his unease growing. He gripped his phone tightly, forcing himself to stay calm. "Madison, where exactly are you?" The car stopped in front of Parker's villa, and Mark quickly got out. Striding inside, he banged on the door forcefully and shouted loudly, "Is anyone there? Open the door." The servant saw Mark and actually looked somewhat disdainful. "Edward's CEO, instead of celebrating your own son's birthday, what brings you here to our Parker family? Our young lady has nothing to do with you anymore." Mark felt as if his head was splitting with pain, and even his vision became slightly blurred. "What did you say? Who told you he's my biological son? Who said that?" He had a sinking feeling that his worst fear was about to come true, yet he clung to a sliver of hope, trying to deny it all. "President Edwards, you've been fooling around outside, even fathered a bastard child. And now you're trying to play innocent. Our young lady must have been blind to fall for a man like you. Get out, our Parker family doesn't welcome you. Our young lady has nothing to do with you anymore." Mark hadn't expected the Parker family's servants to be so hostile toward him, refusing to let him in no matter what. After cursing at him a couple of times, they wouldn't say anything more. Anxious and desperate, he could no longer care about propriety. He had no choice but to resort to violence, intending to force his way into the Parker residence. Just then, a figure hurried over from not far away. "What's going on here? Everyone, get back to your duties." Parker's butler appeared, waving his hand to dismiss the other servants. As they scattered, they didn't forget to spit at Mark before leaving. The butler stepped forward to open the main gate and gestured to Mark with an inviting hand. "Mr. Edwards, our master requests your presence inside." Hearing this, Mark immediately felt relieved. It was Parker Sr. As long as he was allowed inside, everything would be fine. After all, when they got married, it was Parker's father who personally placed Madison into his hands and made him swear to treat Madison well for the rest of their lives. Thinking of this, Mark unconsciously swallowed hard. Feeling inexplicably nervous, he quickened his pace inward, feeling as though the path was endlessly long. He had walked the distance from the entrance to the villa countless times, yet this was the first time it felt so agonizing. In the villa's living room, Parker's father and Parker's mother were sitting on the sofa. Parker's mother had red, swollen eyes and looked utterly exhausted, clearly having cried more than once. When she saw Mark appear, Parker's mother could no longer contain her fury and rushed forward to slap him across the face. "Mark, do you even have a heart? How dare you treat Madison like this?" Mark was struck so hard by the slap that his head jerked to the side, leaving even his assistant gasping in shock. But Mark said nothing, enduring the blow in silence. "Mom, Madison, where are you?" Parker's mother covered her face and sobbed. "Don't call me Mom. I'm not fortunate enough to have a son-in-law who betrays and cheats like you. What exactly did she do wrong for you to treat her like this? She loved you with all her heart. How could you trample on her sincerity like this?" Parker's mother was crying so hard she could barely catch her breath. Parker's father felt heartbroken and gently patted her back, softly comforting her. "All right, don't cry anymore, don't make yourself ill. Quickly help Madam back to rest," Parker's father calmly instructed, then glanced at the butler. The butler nodded in acknowledgement and handed the computer and a document to Mark. "President Edwards, these are the things the young lady left for you. Take a look." Mark suddenly felt terrified by what was before him. With trembling hands, he opened the document, and the bold words "divorce agreement" appeared before his eyes. In a panic, he flipped to the last page and discovered that it was already signed with his and Madison's names. "This can't be. I never signed any divorce agreement. It's fake. This must be fake." Mark suddenly raised his voice, utterly unwilling to believe what was before his eyes, and even more reluctant to accept Madison's decision to divorce him. Yet, on the divorce papers, his name was unmistakably written. He racked his brains trying to recall what had happened 3 days ago, when suddenly, an image flashed through his mind. 3 days ago, he cancelled all his work to stay home with Jiang Shuoro and Enan. At the time, he was drunk, and Jiang Shuoro brought over a document for him to sign. He didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was just a document his assistant had asked Jiang Shuoro to deliver. So he signed it. Mark's face instantly turned pale. Could it be that what he signed wasn't some trivial document, but rather, he didn't dare to think further. He abruptly turned to look at his assistant behind him and asked, "Did you send a document to Jiang Shuoro for me to sign around 10 p.m. 3 days ago?" The assistant shook his head in confusion. "Mr. Edwards, don't you remember, 3 days ago, you said you wanted to compensate the young master and cancelled all your work for the day. You specifically instructed that unless it was about the young master, no one should disturb you. How could I possibly have delivered any documents to you?" Upon hearing this, Mark's heart instantly sank to the depths. It was Jiang Shuoro who had tampered with things. He had been too trusting of Jiang Shuoro, which was why he fell into her trap and signed that divorce agreement. At the mere thought of this, Mark's heart ached fiercely, making even breathing difficult. The divorce agreement crumpled in Mark's hand as his eyes turned bloodshot. Suppressing a surge of anger, he spoke, "Dad, I refuse to acknowledge this divorce agreement." "Mr. Parker sneered coldly, "Then see if you'll acknowledge this instead." The butler took another document from the folder and handed it to Mark. Mark trembled as he took it, glanced at it, and was struck as if by lightning. Staggering back 2 steps, it was a paternity test certificate. and the result column clearly stated that he and Edward's Ewan were indeed biological father and son. Mark gasped, his inner suspicion confirmed at this moment. Madison had known all along, which was why she chose to leave him. Mr. Edwards, you haven't finished reading yet. The butler pushed the computer closer. The first thing that caught his eye was a photo of him playing with Edward's Ewan in kindergarten, followed immediately by an audio recording. What could I do? A mother and child share one heart. Every time I sent Shuarong away, Anan would cry uncontrollably. We couldn't just let the child keep crying, could we? As for Cheryl, after all, she bore me a child, so I can't treat her unfairly. Afraid of pain yet still lured me over. You really can't settle down even with a child. Hearing these words, Mark was left speechless, frozen in place. The hospital, the study, Madison heard everything. Mark's face grew increasingly pale, his fists clenched tightly as a surge of blood and energy churned in his chest, a metallic taste of blood rising in his throat. She had actually heard all those words. Madison loved him so deeply, he couldn't even begin to imagine Madison's heartbreak and despair upon hearing those words. No wonder she had left so resolutely. But how did this even happen? He thought he had kept everything perfectly hidden, he thought he had everything under control. The butler noticed his confusion and said with icy eyes, Mr. Edwards, to be played like a fool by a woman, you've truly managed to surprise us all. Mark shuddered, his hands at his sides clenching into tight fists, knuckles cracking audibly. The butler continued, our family's elder has helped you uncover some evidence. Your son's birth mother actively added Miss Parker's WeChat. The chat records are attached, and what our young lady despises most in life is deceit, betrayal, and slander. Your son was personally sent away by his own mother. All the evidence is right here. Take your time and have a look. Mark was kicked out of the Parker household with all the evidence. He knew he needed to give the Parker family an explanation. Otherwise, not only would Parker Sr. not let him see Madison, but he himself wouldn't have the face to meet Madison either. Outside, the sky darkened as ominous clouds loomed overhead, heavy and oppressive, as if about to collapse. Mark returned to the Edwards family's old mansion with a grim expression. All the guests had already left. He stormed straight into Jiang Shuaro's room, his entire body radiating hostility. Jiang Shuaro, I warned you, if you want Anan to stay with the Edwards family, don't provoke Madison. He reached out and gripped Jiang Shuaro's neck, his large hand gradually tightening with force. Why did you take the initiative to approach her again? What exactly is the deal with that divorce agreement? Mark had bloodshot eyes, devoid of any Parker affection, looking as if he wanted to devour the woman before him alive. Jiang Shuaro's face flushed crimson as she struggled to force out a few words from her throat. Mark, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Don't understand. Mark let out a cold laugh and played the home surveillance footage, showing Jiang Shuaro taking advantage of his drunken state to make him sign the papers. Do you understand now? Jiang Shuaro glanced at it, her face instantly turning deathly pale, her teeth were chattering, and she couldn't utter a complete sentence without stumbling. Mark, the divorce agreement. It was Parker who forced me to do this. Stop making excuses. Mark glared sharply, tightening his grip. The fury of being deceived completely consumed what little rationality remained. And he used almost all his strength. Jiang Shuaro's struggles grew more frantic, her eyes filled with terror. As Jiang Shuaro's breathing became increasingly labored, the room door suddenly burst open. Edward's Ewan rushed in. He was terrified by Mark's appearance and cried out in a trembling voice, Dad, please let Mom go, let her go. He tried with all his might to pry open Mark's large hand, but it didn't budge at all. Edward's mother also arrived just in time, shouting from behind, Mark, let Shuaro go immediately, she's carrying your child. Hearing this, Mark's eyes finally flickered, and his hand abruptly let go. Jiang Shuaro was actually pregnant again. His mind was blank, with the only remaining capacity for thought imagining how Madison would react if she knew Jiang Shuaro was pregnant again. Would she be even more disappointed, even more heartbroken? The moment he thought of Madison's lifeless eyes, Mark's heart ached sharply, making it hard for him to even breathe. Jiang Shuaro collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. She gently touched her abdomen. Convinced she had gambled correctly, she thought that as long as she had this child, no matter what she did, Mark would forgive her. But the next second, she heard Mark's cold voice. "This child cannot be kept. I won't let you give birth to him. Someone, take Jiang Shuoro to the hospital and abort this child." The assistant called for people to step forward, and Jiang Shuoro finally panicked. She scrambled to hide behind Edward's mother, trying to seek Edward's mother's protection. "Madam, please save me. The child I'm carrying is Mark's own flesh and blood." Mrs. Edwards was startled by Mark's sudden command of to the hospital, but she had no choice but to stand in front of Jiang Shuoro. "You wretched fool. Do you even realize what you're saying? Shuoro is carrying your own child. How can you be so heartless? Anyway, Jiang Shuoro must not be touched. Are you trying to drive me to my grave?" Mark swallowed hard, his emotions in turmoil. He slowly turned his head, his dark eyes fixed on Edward's mother, his voice filled with helplessness. "Mom, I listened to you once and let Madison leave me. I can't make that mistake again. Do it," Mark commanded. Now Mark has completely taken control of Edwards's household, and those under his command naturally obey his orders without question. One by one, they directly bypassed Edwards's mother, forcibly dragging Jiang Shuoro away. "Mom, Dad, please let Mom go. I beg you." Edward's Yuan knelt on the ground, crying heart-wrenchingly, but it no longer earned even a glance from Mark. Edwards's mother clutched her chest, gasping for breath in anger, trembling as she pointed at Mark. You want to..." But she couldn't utter a word, only seeing darkness before her eyes as she nearly fainted, and was finally hurriedly helped back to her room by the servants. Mark stood in place, looking at the chaotic old house, but in his mind, the image of Madison appeared. He murmured to himself, "Madison, this time, I won't make the same mistake again." Jiang Shuoro was forcibly made to abort the child, and when her body was weak, she was thrown into a mental hospital. She lay on the hospital bed with a heart as lifeless as ashes, her face pale as paper, as if all strength had been drained from her body. Mark appeared before her, slamming the evidence harshly onto her face. "Did you really think no one would find out about the things you've done, even your own son? You could bear to harm him. You don't deserve to be called a mother." Jiang Shuoro looked at those photos and documents, her face instantly turning deathly pale. She knew that everything she had done was exposed. Her lips trembled as she tried to explain, but she found herself utterly speechless. Mark gazed at her coldly, his dark eyes filled with frost. "Jiang Shuoro, I gave you countless chances. Yet you insisted on degrading yourself. For the rest of your life, you are forbidden to see Annan again. You'll spend your days peacefully in the mental hospital." Jiang Shuoro watched Mark's retreating figure, her heart filled with hatred. She hated Mark's fickleness, how he had whispered sweet nothings to her before, yet now could be so cruel. She hated Edward's Yuan's uselessness. As her son, he couldn't even save her. She hated Madison even more. Why did she get everything, while she herself ended up like this? But now, she was powerless to resist. The torment in the mental hospital was even more terrifying than she had imagined. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Madison was in an ancient castle in London, resignedly feeding Lin Shua's son. "Auntie is the best. Did my mom and dad abandon me?" Xiaobao was playing outside yesterday and refused to come back inside despite the heavy rain. He got soaked and ended up with a fever that very night. To make matters worse, Lin Shuyu and her husband William went out for a trip early this morning, leaving the child with her. At this moment, Madison could only take care of Xiaobao attentively, while occasionally comforting him. "Your parents didn't abandon you. They just what?" Madison couldn't find an excuse. Fortunately, little Bao was obedient and sensible. Though somewhat disappointed, he still ate his meal quietly. Madison looked at his tender face, her heart filled with warmth, though her own life was a mess. Having little Bao by her side was some comfort after all. After taking his medicine, little Bao soon fell into a deep sleep. Madison finally let out a sigh of relief, sitting by the bed. She looked at Xiaobao's fever-flushed little face, her heart filled with tenderness. For some reason, Madison suddenly remembered Edward's Yuan. That day in the hospital, Edward's Yuan was just as miserable. Juchi said. Edward's Ewan caught a cold because he wasn't taken good care of. But Madison clearly remembered that it didn't rain in the capital that night. Edward, so how exactly did Ewan catch a cold, unless Jiang Shuero deliberately made him sick, then took him to the hospital? Using this method to gain Mark's sympathy. At the mere thought of this possibility, Madison could only feel sorrow. Jiang Shuero was chilled to the bone by the despicable means of even exploiting her own child. She had been in England for over a month, even if she didn't deliberately follow domestic news. The updates about the Edwards family were trending, making it impossible for her to avoid seeing them. The birthday banquet wasn't successfully held. Edwards Ewan's identity was also in question. And the Edwards group experienced a major upheaval. Mark was nailed to the pillar of shame for his infidelity. If he hadn't maintained a years-long persona of a devoted husband, he would have just been another playboy from a wealthy family. Yet despite loving Madison for so many years, he secretly had an affair and fathered a child, causing his once glorious image to crumble instantly. Not to mention Mark showed absolutely no mercy when he targeted Jiang Shuero. Someone accidentally witnessed Mark taking a woman for an abortion at the hospital's obstetrics department, after which the woman had a mental breakdown and was sent to a psychiatric hospital. This news could have been suppressed, but now it's blatantly trending. It must have been Mark who authorized it. He wanted her to see, to tell her that he knew he was wrong and was already making amends. But what's the use? Madison smiled self-deprecatingly, her eyes dull and lifeless. The damage was already done. And no amount of amends could undo it. She now only wanted to stay alone in England, to properly heal her wounds. Madison leaned by the window, gazing at the dusky twilight, when her eyes inadvertently drifted to the castle's entrance, where a familiar figure stood. Mark, he actually found his way here. Across the garden, Mark looked at Madison from afar, his dark eyes filled with deep affection, as if trying to etch her image into his heart, yet Madison just looked at him calmly. The once palpable emotions of affection and pain now dissolved into nothingness. She closed the window indifferently, shutting out that unwelcome face. Before long, a servant hurried in. "Miss Parker, there's a Mr. Edwards at the door asking to see you." Madison's eyes remained indifferent, her voice cool. "I won't see him. Tell him to leave." The servant responded and left, never mentioning this person again. Madison also put the matter out of her mind. By evening, the sound of rain pattering outside the window filled the air. Little Bao, having woken up in much better spirits, couldn't contain his lively nature. He pressed his face against the window to look outside and suddenly exclaimed, "Auntie, Auntie, look, there seems to be someone kneeling outside the door." The little one's voice was sweet and childlike, tinged with a hint of confusion and curiosity. Madison only then realized what she had forgotten. She rushed to the window and looked in the direction the little one was pointing. Sure enough, Mark was kneeling in the pouring rain, his solitary figure looking particularly desolate. The bitter flesh tactic, Marcus' old familiar trick. Back then, the sight of him like this would break her heart, making her long to throw herself into his arms instantly. But now, she only found it ridiculous. If he wants to kneel, let him. Madison spoke indifferently, her voice devoid of any emotion. Just make sure to send him to the hospital if he faints. Don't let him die there. She had never imagined that one day she would utter such harsh words. That night, Madison did not sleep soundly. She had many dreams. Dreaming of every little moment between her and Mark, she recalled that kidnapping incident. How both she and Mark had risked everything for each other. Back then, they were so deeply in love, as if the whole world consisted only of each other. She also remembered that Mark had said he would rather be with her than have the Edwards family, yet in the final choice, he still chose to abandon her for the Edwards family. Truly, fate plays cruel tricks. Early the next morning, as Madison got up for breakfast, a servant approached. "Miss Parker, that Edwards gentleman outside has been taken to the hospital." Madison had expected to feel the thrill of revenge. But at this moment she just stirred the thick soup in her bowl with a spoon and softly responded with an "I see." Madison's voice was calm, without any fluctuation. She lowered her head and sipped the soup, as if what she had just heard was merely an insignificant piece of news. After some thought, she still took out her phone. intending to contact someone back home. When coincidentally, Parker Sr.'s call came through. "Madison, Mark has gone to find you, hasn't he?" Madison didn't deny it and replied directly, "Dad, I was just about to contact you to have the Edwards family take him back." Parker's father sighed over the phone, his voice filled with helplessness. "The Edwards family couldn't reach him and had no choice but to come to me. That woman named Jiang Shuoro has taken the Edwards family's child hostage and is forcing Mark to go back and see her." Madison frowned slightly. She hadn't expected Jiang Shuoro to be this insane. To think she wouldn't even spare her own child, just to force Mark to return. "I understand, Dad," Madison responded solemnly. "I'll relay this to Mark." After hanging up the phone, Madison's eyes darkened with complex emotions. In the end, she went to the hospital herself, and because she was worried about leaving Xiaobao alone, she took him along. In the hospital, Mark woke up feeling somewhat dazed. When he opened his eyes, he saw the figure he had been longing for day and night standing before him, and his heart swelled with joy. Madison stood by the bedside, her expression cold and detached. The eyes that were once filled with love now held nothing but indifference. "You're awake." Madison's voice was calm and distant, as if they were merely strangers who had crossed paths by chance. Mark trembled uncontrollably with emotion. For an entire month, he hadn't seen her. The bone-deep longing was like an endless tide, driving him to the brink of madness. At this moment, he finally saw her again, heard her voice, and the flood of longing instantly broke through. With crimson eyes, he suddenly stood up and tightly pulled Madison into his embrace. "Madison, it's really you, Madison. I've missed you so much." Mark's voice was deep and hoarse, filled with endless affection and tenderness. Madison stiffened slightly before pushing him away forcefully. "Mark, we're already divorced." Mark watched as his arms suddenly fell empty, his eyes instantly clouded with pain. "Madison, I don't agree to the divorce," he spoke urgently, trying to salvage something. "I was drunk that day and had no idea I was signing divorce papers." His voice carried a hint of panic and pleading, like a child about to lose the most important thing. Yet Madison only stared coldly at him, her eyes showing no trace of emotion. "Mark, you should have realized that when you were with Jiang Shuoro 6 years ago, this day would come." She let out a disdainful snort, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Mark instantly turned pale, shaking his head helplessly. "Madison, you must believe I had no choice. Everything I did was forced upon me." His voice carried a faint tremor of despair, as if trying to grasp at the last lifeline. "The Edwards family cannot be without an heir. Only by controlling the Edwards family can I better protect you. I never thought." "Enough." Madison's voice was icy and sharp. She didn't want to hear any more of those hypocritical excuses. "Since when did I, Madison, become someone who lives under your wing and needs your protection? Back then, I could risk my life for you. Your protection is nothing more than icing on the cake to me." Madison's words were like fine needle points, each one precisely piercing Mark's heart, leaving him in unbearable agony. "You knew perfectly well that I could face all the difficulties with you." Madison's eyes were filled with disappointment. "Even without the Edwards family, the two of us could build a new future together. That was never an excuse for your infidelity." Mark lay frozen on the bed, his heart feeling as if it had been slashed open with a knife, the pain turning his eyes red. Yes, he knew perfectly well that Madison was never some caged golden canary he kept, but rather a gerfalcon who would share his burdens and even protect him. He was blinded by power, he knew everything, yet still chose to hurt her. What on earth has he done? His vision gradually blurred. Mark couldn't even remember how long it had been since he last cried. Tears streamed down Mark's cheeks, falling onto the pristine white sheets, leaving dark stains. Mixed within it were Mark's despair and remorse. He clenched his fists tightly, his voice choked with emotion. "Madison, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. Please, please give me one more chance. I can't live without you." His eyes were filled with pleading, like a drowning man grasping at the last straw in despair. "Jiang Shuoro has already been sent away by me. I can leave you into the Edwards family. From now on, I'll have no ties with the Edwards family. No matter where I go, you're the only one I want." If the Madison from before had heard this heartfelt confession, she would have been moved to tears. But the Madison now would no longer soften her heart. It's too late, Mark, you're too filthy. She tightened her grip on Xiaobao's hand, looking at him with cold eyes. By the way, I forgot to tell you, the Edwards family is in trouble. Edwards Yuan secretly went to the mental hospital and released Jiang Shuoro. But unexpectedly, Jiang Shuoro turned around and took her own son hostage, saying she wants to see you. Go back, Mark. After all, he is your own son. There's no future for us anymore. Madison's words were razor-sharp, severing Mark's last glimmer of hope completely. Watching Madison's receding figure walk away, his heart felt as if it had been brutally crushed, the pain so intense it robbed him of the courage to chase after her. He knew. This time he had truly and completely lost her. Back in the country, at the Edwards residence, when Mark rushed back, he saw Jiang Shuoro with disheveled hair, clothes in disarray. Her face covered in grime and tear stains, she looked like a demon that had crawled out of hell. She was clutching Edwards Yuan tightly in her arms, having locked herself in a room, refusing to open the door no matter who came to persuade her. Edwards's mother saw Mark return, as if finally finding her pillar of support. Mark, Jiang Shuoro has gone mad, but Annan is innocent. You must save Annan. Mark's face was haggard, his tired eyes filled with red veins. He nodded slightly. Directly had the door broken open, and slowly walked in. Jiang Shuoro, didn't you want to see me? Now I'm here, let Annan go. In the room, Jiang Shuoro suddenly looked up, met Mark's gaze, and burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, she laughed wildly, laughed hysterically, her laughter echoing through the room, sending chills down one's spine. Mark, I heard you eagerly ran off to England, only to be kicked out by Madison. Serves you right, serves you right. Madison will never forgive you in this lifetime. Her words were filled with venom and hatred, as if she wanted to pour all her pain and despair onto Mark. In her arms, Edwards Yuan was frightened by Jiang Shuoro's appearance and cried out, Mom, it's me, Annan, it's me, Annan. His childish voice was full of fear and confusion, trying to awaken a shred of reason in his mother's heart. However, Jiang Shuoro seemed to have completely descended into madness. She shook Edwards Yuan violently, her eyes filled with resentment. Shut up, it's all because you're useless, making me unable to even become Mrs. Edwards, it's all your fault. As she spoke, she grew increasingly agitated, her facial expression turning more ferocious. The fruit knife in her hand left a bloody mark on Edwards Yuan's neck, causing Edwards Yuan to wail in pain. Mark suddenly remembered how a month ago, Jiang Shuoro had similarly held Madison hostage. Back then, he had watched coldly, but this time he had no choice but to intervene. Jiang Shuoro, calm down, Annan is your own son. Jiang Shuoro seemed to hear something laughable, her body trembling violently as she laughed hysterically. My son, yes, he is my son, but I don't want to live anymore, so let him die with me. Mark in desperation took large strides forward, getting closer and closer to the two. Jiang Shuoro sensed Mark's approach, and the bone-deep fear surged within her again, driving her into instant hysteria as she wildly slashed the knife in front of her. Don't come any closer, stay away, Mark reacted swiftly, grabbing Edward's hand and shoving him away. But in the next moment, the knife plunged straight into his heart, blood gushing out instantly. Jiang Shuoro's eyes widened in shock as she let out a piercing scream. Ah, you ran into me yourself. Don't blame me, it was you who ran into me. President Edwards, the assistant exclaimed in shock, quickly instructing those around to call for an ambulance, sending Mark to the hospital. The doctor in charge of the emergency was still Mark's good friend Ju Qi. Seeing Mark covered in blood, he cursed under his breath, lamenting the tragedy. A perfectly fine person. How did they end up in such a wretched state? A day and a night passed, and finally, the light in the emergency room went out. Edwards's mother had been waiting outside the whole time, looking as if she had aged 10 years in an instant. H.E., how is my son? Her voice trembled as if she might faint at any moment. Ju Qi sighed, his expression grave, and said, his life is saved, but as for when he'll wake up, that's up to fate now. As the words fell, Edward's mother felt as if struck by a bolt from the blue, staggering back and nearly collapsing to the ground, covering her face with her hands. She wailed in utter despair, "It's all my fault, I was the one who forced him. Had I known this would happen, I should have just let him be with Madison, now that he's gone. What's the use of me clinging to the Edwards family?" Her cries echoed through the hallway, filled with desperation and regret, yet no matter how bitterly she wept. Mark, lying on the hospital bed, showed no response. As if trapped in an endless world of darkness, Jiang Shuoro had completely lost her mind. She was already an escapee from a mental institution, and now that she had harmed Mark, Edward's mother would not let her off easily either. In the end, it was only after Edward's Yuan pleaded desperately that Edward's mother chose to lock her in the attic on the top floor of the Edwards family's old mansion, having someone watch her daily to prevent her from causing trouble. Meanwhile, Marcus' condition in the hospital remained unstable, and Edward's mother spent most of her time there caring for Mark, paying little attention to Jiang Shuoro's situation. The servants in the household disliked Jiang Shuoro immensely and treated her with utter indifference. They routinely delivered 2 meals a day, but whether she ate or not was none of their concern, until one day, a servant suddenly realized that the meals she had delivered hadn't been touched for 3 days. In a panic, she pushed the door open and entered, only to find Jiang Shuoro hanging from the ceiling beam, already lifeless. The servants were all startled and hurriedly informed Edward's mother. When Edward's mother heard the news, she just gritted her teeth in anger. Burn it quickly and bury it casually. To this day, she is filled with endless regret. She was the one who personally chose Jiang Shuoro to send to her son's bed, only for this woman to nearly kill Mark. At the thought of this, Edward's mother gnashed her teeth in fury. Jiang Shuoro's body was hastily buried. On the day of her funeral, only Edward's Yuan secretly went to see her one last time. After all, blood is thicker than water. No matter how much he feared Jiang Shuoro, he couldn't bear to watch her leave this world all alone. The small figure knelt before Jiang Shuoro's tombstone, kowtowed 3 times with resounding thuds, then left without looking back. Parker family's UK-based company was officially taken over by Madison. Lin Shuyu had finally had her fill of fun and returned to the ancient castle with William, who also brought her news from the Edwards family. She couldn't help but sigh. Now that Mark is in a coma, the Edwards family is without a leader and has already begun to decline. Madison listened to Lin Shua's words but felt an unexpected calm within. She had once deeply loved Mark, had once given everything for him, and had also experienced despair and pain. Yet now, hearing that he lies unconscious, there is only relief left in my heart. Perhaps this is fate's arrangement. The entanglements and complications between them are finally coming to an end. Only in the end, no one got what they truly wanted. Madison, are you going back to your home country for a visit? Lin Shuyu looked at her with a hint of concern in her eyes. She knew how deeply her best friend had once loved Mark, and she also knew how much suffering she had endured for him. They say the dead should be respected, but now Mark is practically no different from being dead. Madison shook her head, her tone firm. Parker family's branch here has just been handed over to me, and I can't leave yet. She had her own career, her own life, and people more worthy of her cherishing and protection. As she thought, her gaze drifted not far away, where Xiaobao was happily playing in the garden. As for you, all you know is going out to play. If others didn't know better, they'd think Xiaobao was my son. Madison complained verbally, but her actions were honest. Seeing Xiaobao running towards her, she still opened her arms and picked him up. Auntie is the best. Mom and Dad, go have fun. I have Auntie, and that's enough for me. Xiaobao clung to her like a koala, but she didn't mind. Just held him, her gaze Parker as gentle as water. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Madison also smiled faintly. Now, she is very happy. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.